Welcome, listeners, to Real Wisdom with NK, the Midwest Film Festival's podcast exploring the journeys, insights, and lessons from filmmakers and creatives across the Midwest. Y'all, get ready to leave this 45-minute conversation, give or take, changed, expanded, and really just clear on what it takes to be a producer. And sitting down with Angie today, what I really got clear on is that her success has come from leading with her heart, creating space where she's showing up deeply present to what people's best skills are, and then moving things out of the way so that people can expand fully into their gifts on set and to create powerfully and to bring together the money and the vision to synergetically create something that everybody can be proud of. She does it with such incredible poise and really shares the art form of producing independent film. So if you're curious about what it takes to be a producer or what a producer is or how you can be a better producer, this is a conversation you're not going to want to miss. All right, y'all. I'm so excited to have Angie Gaffney here with us today to discuss the art of producing and what it actually takes to make an independent film here in the Midwest. Angie is a Chicago-based producer and entrepreneur, recognized in New City's Film 50 Hall of Fame. She's raised millions for independent films like Single Car Crashes and Desire Lines that actually went to Sundance in 2024. She's a member of the PGA and leads 521 Films. She co-founded IFA Chicago and served as an executive director from 2015 to 2023 of IFA Chicago. She is an entrepreneur, she's a mom, and she's, of course, a producer. Welcome, Angie.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you.
It's so great to be here.
It's so exciting. You look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. So do you.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. So I was really excited to have you on today and to talk about producing, but the art of producing, because I really feel everyone that I've not had the opportunity to work under you with you being a producer, but every single person that I talk to that has nothing but incredible things to say.
That's very nice.
Yeah. And for me, what I know to be so is that if people love working with you, especially when you're in the space of production, which is really creative problem solving, right?
Yeah.
That there's an art to it. So I was like, let's unlock some of this art. And really the point of this podcast is to allow the information that you wish you would have had a decade ago be available to the people who are getting into this industry right now, whether they're young and walking into the space, maybe they're making a career change, or maybe they're like, dang, I really want to level up. I've been doing this for a while, but I want to expand in this, or open to the possibility of doing it better. Mm-hmm. And I feel that you are the perfect person to talk about.
No pressure, but I'm honored to be here.
We're listening.
Listeners,
yes,
pay attention.
Pay attention. So my first question for you is really how you got into producing and what that journey and pathway has been for you.
Yeah, I'll give you sort of the high level. I was a theater nerd in high school, both on stage and not behind the camera because there's no camera in theater, but on stage and behind the scenes. And when I came to school in Chicago, I didn't know what I wanted to do except that it was something with storytelling. So I found my way into DePaul University's film school, actually through Brittany Ward at the time, who's one of my closest collaborators now. And
we love Brittany.
We love Brittany. And I didn't really know what a producer was. I didn't know what that meant. I had done some stage managing in theater. So I started first assistant directing because that was kind of similar. And as I learned more about the industry, I said, oh, yeah, that boss role, that's what I want.
Come on, boss role.
Come on, boss role. But it really was an organic discovery for me. And I don't know that everyone who thinks about this industry or wants to be in this industry comes into film school as like, I want to be a producer, because that term can be so vague and it has so many different titles and meanings. So for me, it's been a real privilege to be able to put sort of my entrepreneurial spirit towards making films. I believe it's one of the most entrepreneurial things you can do because you
Mm.
literally, at least in the feature world, you literally build a business and do all the legality and the fundraising with that, and then manufacture a product which you sell, and then you tear it all down and you start again. So it really is serial entrepreneurship, which is both infuriating and exhausting and incredibly amazing.
My solar plexus are literally lighting up right now because I was having this conversation with Corey Noise Floor, who's one
Yeah.
of our incredible sponsors. And
Shout out to Corey. He's
yes,
great. Love
pew,
you,
pew,
Corey.
pew, we love Corey. And actually producing this podcast that we're sitting upon and right now. We were having the conversation, literally this specific conversation was like the framework that I want people to really understand was like what I've come to, which was my realization in this season was like, this is really just building a small business, scaling it, and then doing it all over again. And you just said it so beautifully. And that's it. And when we think about it that way, you start to think about as a business owner, who are the people that you're hiring? What is the environment that you want to create? What is the end goal? And you're thinking about that as you're creating, right?
Yeah.
And so it is not a surprise to me now knowing that you came from the theater world. I also come from the theater world, and it just it cuts your teeth in a different way.
Yeah, it totally does.
Right?
Yeah, it totally
you
does.
it's like even watching an interview that Denzel the other day was talking about he was going back to the stage and someone was like, oh, there's so many Hollywood stars that are now going to be on the stage. He was like, I'm a theater actor first who does film. I'm a theater actor. And I was like, and you can always tell when someone comes from the world of theater, there's just a different level of withedness is what I think of first. I was like, because you're in such real time that you don't have time, with film, you get to go edit it out. There are things that can be done. Like theater, it's out there and it's gone.
I have to tell you a quick theater story.
Please.
If we have time for a quick
yes,
theater
we
story.
do.
So,
of course, we have time for theater stories always.
In high school, I oscillated between like theater and in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder High has an incredible theater department. They have a 2,000 seat house with a balcony. When I was there, we were doing shit like Chicago, and like the high school students were fully wearing what you would wear in a mature Chicago production. So it's very advanced. But we did a stage adaptation of Shakespeare in Love.
Oh, wow.
And I was Viola, and there was one sort of moment I particularly remember. I was sick throughout the whole run. My voice was going out, and there's a moment at the end where I'm talking to like the queen or whatever, it escapes me now, and my mic went out, in this big theater. And suddenly, like 10 minutes later, there's like this actor behind me that isn't supposed to be in the scene, but is in full hair and makeup and wardrobe. And I'm like, shit, that's the sound guy. And he comes around and he like slowly like unbuttons the back of my dress and like swaps out the mic packs and puts it back on in full, early Shakespeare attire. And so when you say that, I think about like, oh, there's something to that with theater about the scrappiness of having to do it live.
Yeah.
And, this poor little freshman going on with like his little Oliver Twist bucket hat and some suspenders. Like undressing me without
making it happen. Making it happen on stage. We got this. I was like, that's creative problem solving at its finest in real time. All pressure right now. So I want you, like you were talking about, people don't necessarily walk in and be like, I'm going to go to school to be a producer. There are some folks who do. I know a few, producer and director of this podcast, Caitlin. I know that's what she went to school for. But for you, understanding how did you start to define for yourself what a producer was? And one, I would say, how do you define it for yourself? And for someone who's like, am I a producer? Could I be a producer? How would you define it for them?
Yeah. For me, it's really about the intersection of the business and the creativity. And in no way do I ever see the producer as the expert. I see the producer whose job it is to bring out the expertise in everyone else.
Say that again, please, for the people in the back.
For the people in the back. In no way do I ever see the producer as the expert. I see the producer as the person whose job it is to bring out the expertise in everybody else.
Yes.
And so my number sort of one trait when I try to approach a project or my role as a producer energetically is to listen and to facilitate communication.
Yes.
And of course, there's talent negotiations and legal and production know-how. There are all these sort of tangible, real world skills. But ultimately, you're leading a team that requires a lot of creative excellence from a lot of really excellent people. And for most people, in order to access that level of creativity and feel free to fully express, whether it's production design, directing, hair and makeup, they have to be fully safe and supported in doing so. And that's a tall order because specifically independent film production is like not very glamorous. It's just brutal sometimes.
Yo, it is not for the faint of heart. Like it is it's a little battlefield sometimes.
It's a little battlefield. It was one of my first mentors when I was an AD said, he was Canadian. He called the talent the Bears. He would always be like, the Bears are on the way. I'd be like, oh, God. But he used to say, Angie, everyone's true colors come out at the end of week 2, heading into week 3 of overnights. And I was like, you are so right.
It's so true. It's like when you go and get a rescue animal and they're like the first couple weeks you're not going to really see who that dog is or the cat is. But then week 3 you're going to see. You don't see who you brought home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an extreme sport.
It is an extreme sport in its own right. So I think that is sort of the energetic way I try to approach my position as a producer, is just sort of facilitating this really wonderful container to tell a story that we all care about. I think there's also a reality in that, because producers, the credit of producer has been given around very loosely. Let me take that back.
I mean, are you? Because I would say leave that on the floor. Maybe it's a yes and.
I was just going to say it's smoother, but the credit of producers is sort of just handed out to people who sort of add value. So there's this, in the general public and in the wider industry, there's, in my opinion, this sort of misconception that there's all these different producers and they just sort of add value and that maybe they have money. And for me, I'm effectively the CEO of a startup.
Yes.
I have investors to answer to. I have a script with integrity to maintain. If you give me money, sure, that's great, but that doesn't make you a producer. That makes you an executive producer or co-producer. So as I've come into the full producing role a little bit more, I've become really protective of that particular title because I love that role. I love being a producer, and I want to see it respected and understood in the industry in the same way that a director is. And I think right now it's given a credit that's too loose to too many people.
I wholeheartedly agree. I have nothing to add to that but the snaps and the nods that I've been given. Yeah. And just having discernment, really having discernment with who's getting those credits, because I think people don't understand how much people are looking to them to lead them, whether they're saying it or not. The other thing that I think is really important, it's like you talked about the misconceptions of what it is to be a producer and what it is really, what I hear is to be a leader. And you spoke about how you're bringing in the people with the expertise. What are some of the things that you do to create a space where they can expand into their expertise powerfully? What are some non-negotiables that you set up to keep integrity to the script, to be able to powerfully answer to the people who are investing? And then most importantly, to create that space for people to live into their greatness.
It's been a lot of trial and error, and I haven't gotten it perfect all the time because I didn't go to management school, right? I went to film school, and the leadership training in film school is desperately lacking in so many ways. But it's about asking a lot of questions from the get-go. So with all of my department heads, always ask, what do you need to succeed? Or, how can I support you in this, rather than dictating this is what it is. I'll say, hey, you have 50,000 or whatever for your departmental budget. Tell me how you want to break that down. What does that look like for you? There's a lot of ownership that has to be given to them immediately. I'm really just a support system for them. It's not their job to answer to the investors, it's mine.
Right.
And so I'm like, how can I facilitate you doing your best work? And if that is the end result of each of these department head meetings, then I'm happy to answer to the investor through that lens.
That's so good. And so I really hear you saying that you're creating these guardrails to help them get to wherever it is that they want to go, whatever that big vision is. How are we creating the space where you can do that? And really not to the point of you're saying like you're building over and over again. Every single time you do this, it's going to look different. Every single department's going to have a different need. Every script is going to have different needs. And what I love about filmmaking and storytelling is that we have creative pathways. There's no, like, we know the end result that we're working to get to, but how you get there is kind of up to you, right? And so you're just creating the way to just make sure, like, guardrails, like, let's just not get too far off track to get there and be able to advocate at the end of the day, should you need to.
And I think, as I get into bigger budgeted projects, I mean, the complexities of negotiations, legal, financing just increase, right? Yeah. So I'm really excited to be at that point in my career where I'm feeling challenged by putting together the financing and the deals and the business end and all of that. There's a lot of creative problem solving in that too. You're looking for money, you're looking for distribution partners, you're trying to find the right fit, but you also want to sell it, but then what's the marketing poster? I mean, it's super fun. So I'm really enjoying sort of stepping into that in a higher level way, and gathering some mentors from out of state who answer all my questions.
Oh, we love that. I want to talk a little more about the challenges you're talking about some of the challenges and new things that you're stretching into as you have these bigger budgets, like union versus non-union, and how are like some of the ways that you're navigating, how you go about structuring these deals in a way that you can still get the thing made because it's independent, yet making sure that it's equitable and people are getting paid what they need to get paid and having the structure that it needs to have. How do you kind of toe that line and figure out what to do and how to do it?
I mean, it all starts with the script, and it starts with, what does the story need to be told? Like, we're doing a horror film, right? Or I'm not right now, but say theoretically we're doing a horror film. Is this, like found footage paranormal activity, or is this sort of Get Out, and it's very intentional and structured? So it always starts with, what does the story need, and is the core team on the same page with what that actually means in terms of execution?
We know as independent filmmakers that changes how things are going to be structured financially. But so it was like, yes, you want to, as you scale and these things get bigger, you want to be able to expand and make it maybe a union film, but also, will it get made if it's a union film? And like, what are the ways that you kind of like creatively navigate expansion in that space while still being like, okay, we're not there yet. How do you strike the balance?
That has been a bit of a learning curve, which I would not recommend, really, a learning curve with a union, with like deciding if it's a union film or not. It usually doesn't go well. But I think that's where having people, at least for me, who've done this before, with really institutional knowledge and knowledge on the union dynamics in the state where I'm filming, have been really critical. I've had a project flip nod to Caitlin, that was fine. It ended up being fine. But had I had more expertise in the beginning of that process, I would have been able to be like, oh, this is why, this is why, this is why we should just go union from the start. I was grateful in that moment that our investors and our partners in that particular project were not scared by that and were willing to put up the money to cover the union and unionization of the crew, which is very much not the case with everyone. So for me, that question specifically around the unions is really like, what is the union presence in the state that you're filming in, and what is that threshold? And this is where, for me personally, having been a former executive director of a nonprofit here in Chicago and having connects sort of at the state government level, this is where this type of local connectivity with government officials or union heads or lobbyists or organizing groups is really important as a producer, because the heads of unions get voted on and move and policies change. And there is a political aspect to this as well, as much as that word just kind of sucks these days. But there is a political aspect.
We need something harder than this to talk about that.
Where's the whiskey?
For those of you who are listening, we're just drinking water. We're going to have tea later, but we might need to have some whiskey in said tea for that.
Yeah, I think that is something that I was sort of forced into by way of being an executive director for a nonprofit here in the city, that I'm really, really grateful I have, because it is an incredible piece of the puzzle when it comes to navigating relationships, navigating union relationships, navigating tax credits, and learning from that process and having that transparency with government officials or policies to be able to say, oh, you did this wrong, do this better next time, or whatever it may be.
So good. So we're going to back into this a little bit, because some people are listening to this or have no idea, like, what does flipping it mean?
Oh, yes.
What is it? No, this is great. So this is for everybody. For those of you who are at the level where you know what it is to get your film flip, you know what we're talking about. But for someone who's like, what does that even mean? Can you explain a little bit about that? And then the unionization of the crew versus the talent, because those are two different things.
Yeah. So there are a handful of different unions and guilds in the film industry, and they all, depending on the state, sort of kick in at different tiers. So we know there's SAG-AFTRA, which is...
whoop, whoop. I'm a proud SAG-AFTRA
Love member. SAG, always SAG. You can find their contracts on sagindy.org. It's very easy if you haven't done it before. There's SAG-AFTRA for talent. There's the Writers Guild, WGA for writers. There's DGA, Directors Guild. IATSE, International Association of Theatrical and Stage Employees. I believe. You can double check that, but I think that's right. Covers most of the crew. And then there's subsets of that. So there's, the camera is local 600. They all have numbers.
So many numbers.
So many numbers.
So many numbers.
Crew is local 476, right? There's different sort of locals and groups that cover these respective positions. And then there's the Teamsters, who on larger projects handle all the transportation, the trucks, the trailers, et cetera. And union and guilds are really, really important in an industry like this, because it's effectively, you're always working freelance, right? And so if you have to negotiate terms and negotiate your own likable living conditions, or whatever it may be, or appropriate or safe or well-paid or healthcare benefits with each individual project, it's a lot of work. And there's no power.
Work.
There's no power in that for the workforce.
Right.
So unions are really, really important. And in Chicago, Chicago has always been pretty accepting of indie film, or folks who are part of the union working on an indie film to gain more experience or whatever it may be. But as is the nature with any city, those dynamics change when leadership changes.
Right.
And so on this particular film, we were close to sort of the union threshold, and I had a lot of I know a lot of my closest crew members and friends are in the union because we've now been doing this for a decade. And so I called them all out. They're all willing to work non-union. And basically all that means is that I'm not paying pension and health on top of their wages to a union, and I'm not I have some more flexibility with regards to specific roles and specific rules. Some people really abuse that. And that's when unions getting involved is important. I don't feel abused that, but we just took for granted that all of these fabulous people who were willing to work non-union, that the leadership felt differently about that.
Got it.
So when a project flips, it basically means that the production company has to pay P&H and abide by that pension and health and abide by that union contract for the entire shoot. Our budget was small enough that the rates themselves didn't necessarily change, but how we structured overtime, how we structured meal penalties, how we, again, contribute to their health care, that was all sort of costs we had to absorb.
Got it.
And in our case, it didn't mean that if you were a non-union person working on that show that you had to join.
Okay.
But that was exciting for some people. Some people wanted to join the union.
Because it gives them the opportunity then to be able to join the union.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
And really in most states, where the hardest part is in like this 700, on feature films specifically, the 750,000 to like $1.5 million budget range.
750,000 to $1.5 million. That's the threshold you were talking about, right?
Yeah. And I think Chicago has moved towards the lower end of that budget range, but that is the hardest place to produce a independent film in a state where unions are prevalent, because it's not enough money where going union financially makes sense. But you're also at risk of being noticed or being quote unquote flipped.
Got it.
And for the record, I only ever want to make union movies. I love the union, you know? As I sort of grew through this 1 to 2.5 budget range, that was a really hard nuance to discover. That was a long-winded answer, but I hope
know.
it was
I think
helpful.
it's so helpful. It's going to be so helpful for people as they go along. Because again, this is information you wish you would have had 10 years ago, right? Maybe even 10 months ago. And you learn it, and that's just like you're paying that forward. And what was I know the biggest thing that I've heard so far that you gleaned from it is like, had you known at the beginning, you would have been able to make that educated decision at the beginning and like, okay, we're going to go union, and then been able to move from there. Because how did you have to what was the impact? How did you have to back into that?
We made a couple assumptions, right? We made an assumption that we were shooting 2 hours outside of the city. So we made the wrong assumption that being sort of in a more rural area away from the center of the city would allow us to stay under the radar of the union, I guess, which is sort of a loaded term. That was our collective decision as producers, and it was arguably the wrong one. So there was that, and then it's really my fault. And it's all fine. Everyone was taken care of. I love the union, no issues. But I was trying to be proactive with the union and say like, hey, we're filming this thing. Some of my most trusted colleagues that are friends are coming out for this, but we don't have the budget for it to be a full union production. And so I was sort of the one in that situation who inadvertently was like, hey, we're here. You know? It's my fault. But
you went with the advice my mother gave me before parent-teacher conferences only, always. Nicole, when I walk in that room, I better not be surprised. So if there's anything I need to know, let me know now.
Yeah.
So you were just letting them know, and you thought it would be all right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everything was all right, but lessons were learned along the way. Yes.
Yeah. But it was like, the impact of that on that particular film was $300,000 to $400,000. So it's not like, yes, it's all fine, and it's a tricky thing because that amount of money would sink most independent projects.
Ooh, great. Talking about flip. My tummy just flipped when you gave me that number. So you have a project. You said part of, this, you bring your entrepreneurial skills into the space, and you're needed to secure money for this amazing new, we'll call it a horror script because we were talking about horror already, this new horror film that you want to make. What are some of the key ways that you go about securing funding for something that you believe in?
It's hard.
I know funding's so hard.
It's so hard.
But how do we make it less hard? Right? It's about a mindset, maybe?
Yeah, let's make it about a mindset.
Yes.
I think the way I think about sort of funding or the process to get to a green light is that I'm sort of just like attaching pieces of third-party validation. I'm like collecting validating tokens of sorts. And then when I have enough, I can move the film forward. So what does that mean tangibly for me?
Yeah.
That if I'm looking at, say, like a $4 million feature film picture, I'm initially, I'm like, okay, where am I filming that where I can leverage the tax credit?
Okay.
And I can sell that tax credit in advance and get a loan against it up front to cash flow my production. So that is anywhere from 25 to like 35% of your budget can be secured just against the tax credit before you've even raised a dollar.
And for those of you who are so confused about the tax credit, do not worry, because guess what we're going to have? A whole conversation on another episode about the tax credit. So if you're curious, don't worry. We got you covered.
It's a really, really critical piece of moving a project forward for independent filmmakers. So if you don't know much about it, I would, of course, encourage you to reach out. And Illinois is great because the threshold for short films is pretty low. So relative to other states.
Right, it's like 50,000, isn't it?
50,000,
Mhm.
yeah. And then you can qualify for the tax credit, and that can be a part of your funding. So for me, that's always usually the first piece in initially is thinking about the tax credit strategy and how we're leveraging that. Then it's usually at that point on most indie films, it's like, okay, can we get a little bit of equity? Can we get, Uncle Bob to write us a check for $300,000 to sort of get the ball rolling? And then when we have sort of enough of a minimum amount, what are our personal connections to cast, to other producers, to directors that we can sort of pull in? And then say you have like one good cast member and you finance the tax credit and you have $1 million in equity. I mean, you're over 50% of the way there. And that usually opens the door for you to start to attach more cast. And then once that happens, you have the world of distributors, this idea of a sort of old idea, but of pre-sales.
I was gonna say, is that something you do ahead of time? Are you thinking about distribution at the beginning? That's what it sounds like.
I am now, yeah. When I was doing smaller projects, it was sort of an after-the-fact thing. But they can come in early and help with the funding of it. So I find the bigger the project is, unless you're just getting a check from a studio, at least on the independent side, it's sort of a combination of debt financing, equity financing, tax credit, family money, personal favors. You just have to sort of compile it all together.
It's an art.
It is an art.
It's an art, right?
It's
You're
an
stringing
art.
these things together and you're really finding ways to be resourceful. The thing that I've heard underneath everything that you've said today is relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships, leveraging those relationships, thinking creatively only always about how you can bring people together to do this thing, and the synergy of those people, which comes from knowing people. And when I say knowing people, it's not like the biggest piece of advice I got when it came to like networking or knowing people. It's like, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And I think that's really, really, really powerful. Is there any thing that you always use to be clear on the kind of people that you want to work with? Any like metrics of like with the relationships? Do you do it kind of per project? Like for me, I'm always thinking about like I might have lots of relationships and people that I love, but I know some people don't play well together.
Yeah.
So I'm always thinking about like who will be the best group of people to bring together around this table.
Yeah, totally. 100%. And, as you do it more and more, that I think that becomes a little more of a natural instinct and less of sort of a methodical, like, I'm going to check this box and I know that this happens, or like these two people don't work well together. For me in feature films, because it's such a director driven medium, like I am really initially looking at who's directing because they're leading the set, right? They're leading the vision day to day, even if I like to think I have a lot of say in it as well. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm saying, like, what is their personality type? What are the people that they need around them? And then sort of from my roster of people that I've worked with, I can be like, oh, I think this would be a good fit. This would be a good fit, et cetera. I really, really emphasize diversity in hiring across all of the projects.
You can't hear it. I'm snapping. If you're watching, you know what I'm doing.
And yes, snapping. And I think that can mean for some people, I think, like checking a box or, following the state's guidelines so they can get the tax credit. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what is the most inclusive hiring process I can have where I'm interviewing and I'm getting people in from new places and I'm expanding the people I look to work with. Usually, if the process, like the integrity of the hiring process or the casting process is with blinders off and you're focused on meeting and bringing in new people from new places, you get a really wonderful, diverse outcome of individuals. And that's diversity in mindset, in race or ethnicity, in gender, in cultural backgrounds, in working styles. And so I think that is really critical. And I always try to partner on features with workforce development programs in a way to sort of give the next generation of people a leg up.
And from a practical standpoint, having the diversity of thought and age and gender and race, what is the biggest impact that you see from hiring from that space of integrity?
Undoubtedly always leads to a better story, because I think people challenge each other, talk about it, or bring their own upbringing or experiences or whatever it may be to inform their art, which, and again, I go back to if they're fully expressed, then I have done my job. Right? But I also, I think one of the words I lean on a lot when I'm sort of creating, I guess, helping to create a culture on set is this idea of curiosity. And I think it's very hard to have curiosity if you're surrounded by people who look exactly like you and think exactly like you and talk exactly like you. Like it's just,
girl,
like you can't. How is that gonna? What new creative ideas is that gonna prompt? Or like where does that challenge you or bring the edges of things? So I really try to lead with curiosity, like across all ways, and hopefully bring that to the space so that when the gaffer talks to the key grip and they're from very different backgrounds and they've never met each other, they too have permission to be curious about one another. And so that's sort of the mindset of the process that's really important to me.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's so beautiful. It allows people to organically get into each other's world. And for those of us a bit on set, you know that it's a pressure cooker of humans learning about each other very quickly for very long hours. And for those of you who haven't, trust me, you'll find out. So yeah, it's a way just to really explore different cultures and ways of being in just a very organic way, right? I always ask people, like, especially folks that are not, the global majority. I was like, if you're looking across the table and every single person looks like you, yet you say you are an ally, or I ask you, okay, maybe you just didn't think about it before. So bring someone to the table that does exactly what you do, but doesn't look like you. And if in fact you cannot find a person, ask a friend. And if in fact that friend can't find a person, I ask you, are you really an ally? Because how can you be an ally of someone that you're not in a relationship with? How could you have any regard or even concept of what they're up against if you're not even in relationship with someone who doesn't look like you?
Yeah.
And whatever that might look like, whether they're disabled, whether they, like whether it has to do with gender or age. If you're not doing it and you're not just in daily relationship with those folks, how could you ever be in allyship with those folks?
Yes, 100%. And I think through that lens, it's also very important for me to look at like the story that's being told and who the people that are in charge of telling that story.
Come on.
What is their sort of cultural agency or relationship to speak with and through these lens, right? Because it doesn't do any good for there to be like an all-white crew telling an Asian story or something like that. I mean,
the terror of it all.
The terror of it all that has happened for so many years and so long. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the person in charge has to like look exactly like the lead character, right? But I think it's really, really important that there's a level of sort of cultural ownership and competency that's in synergy with the story you're trying to tell, and that reflects an awareness of your own biases or your own preferences.
So good. So before we get to tea time, we have a couple of hard-hitting questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Right now.
Yeah.
What are you loving? What are you leaving? And what are you longing for?
I think you've asked me this.
I have, but it could be, it
it's
changes.
Probably very different. It does
Yes.
change. I am loving negotiating with my toddler.
How old's the toddler?
2.5.
Oh gosh, that's strong, hard negotiations.
Strong, hard negotiations, and he's incredibly vocal.
Ooh,
so he'll be like,
I can't imagine.
He'll be like, all right, Mom, can we do some baseball? And then I want to go outside, and then I want some gummies, and then I want to watch TV. Is that fair? I'm like, what?
Yeah. Aye, Captain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am loving that. I am leaving a certain level of tolerance behind. My inherent nature is very kind, a little more passive, a little more quiet. And that's fine and good, but I have also been very tolerant in my life, sometimes to a fault. And so for me, the thing I'm practicing in my leadership and in my life at home and in my life with my friends is really saying the thing.
Yeah.
Really saying the thing and not wasting a ton of time and energy on people or situations that don't serve me.
Ooh, that's so good. And what are you longing for in this season of your life? Or just today?
Well, I have an investor meeting after this, so I'm longing for something specific there. But I think it feels like a very sort of loving season for me, and not in the sense of romance, although that's great too, but the feeling, receiving love from family, community, people. I notice, especially in this chaotic media political climate, like I feel myself really needing a lot of that sort of reciprocal love to give and receive that in both small ways and very big ways on a more regular basis.
That's so good. I find myself holding hugs a little longer.
Yeah.
Really making time for the sacred pause and being with people in a deeper way.
Yeah.
One more hard-hitting question.
Okay.
And then, y'all, we got tea to spill. So we're going to find out what her biggest rookie mistake was and how she bounced back from that. But that'll be over tea. You'll have to come back and find us for that. But as we leave and get our tea, what is your go-to snack and crafty when you're on set?
Oh, God, I love crafty. It is terrible. Like, I will intentionally tell the craft service person to put the crafty table in a place where I am not near it, like on a regular basis.
Make it inaccessible for me, please.
I can't do it. After lunch, I have to have something sweet.
Ooh, I love like something sweet, girl. I gotta have a little something sweet.
Those like little fruit gummies that my son eats all the time. I will take those. I've not had the pleasure of being on like a large studio production yet. So I hear they have like
Smoothie trucks, girl, the smoothie baby.
And so I look forward to that day.
Yes.
For the time being, I'm okay with like the little Hershey's bar of chocolate and the toddler gummies.
Hershey's and gummies. If you're working with Angie, take notes. It's just a little pro tip. Always be listening and watching for what the producers and the folks on set are eating, because when you're the one making sure Crafty's where it needs to be, I promise you, they'll notice. It's been an absolute pleasure sitting with you today, Angie. Thank you so much for just sharing your knowledge and being so generous and honest and heart forward, and not only sharing where you are right now in this moment, but how you show up in the world. The production world is a little better because of you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to bask in your presence. I do it any and every day of the week.
Oh, I received that. We did it, y'all. That's it. That's Real Wisdom with NK. I hope you know a little more about what it takes to be a producer. And if you have more questions or you're curious and want to know how you can find out more about Midwest Film Festival, about the podcast, or the folks that are a part of this incredible organization, go to MidwestFilm.com, become a member, sign up for our newsletter, and make sure you do not miss our monthly screenings. You heard that right, every single month. The last Monday of every month, you can find us at the Claudia Cassidy Theater, located in the Cultural Center. We'll see you next time at Real Wisdom with NK or at a screening.